Thank you for joining our panel entitled Philanthropic Investment in Core Facilities. My name is Rand Haley. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Research Infrastructure at the University of Louisville, and I very much personally look forward to hearing what the panelists have to say and having the discussion with the group afterwards. I think this is a topic with a lot of untapped opportunity in the core facilities world, and I know a little bit about what's going on at other institutions, but I look forward to learning about things that I don't know yet about. We're going to have 3 talks. The first is by Aaron Larson. He's the Director of Operations for Shared Research Resources at Seattle Children's Research Institute. Our second presenter will be Sara McArdle. She's a Senior Staff Scientist at the La Jolla Institute for Immunology. I will talk third, and then we'll transition to a Q&A.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, as Rand said, my name is Aaron Larson, Director of Operations at Shared Research Resources at Seattle Children's Hospital and Research Institute. I also want to mention, I've been a member of ABRF for such a long time. I think my first annual meeting was 2018 in Myrtle Beach, but this is really my first time being able to contribute back and give a talk, so I really appreciate everyone being here. Hopefully it'll be of interest. I'm kind of framing this around philanthropic investment, but specifically around extramural funding for capital equipment to be put into a core. And I'll kind of share some of my experiences around that, and also do a little bit of a compare and contrast with the maybe more traditional S10 approach, which has been around for roughly 40 years or so. Oops. Lost it. The button wasn't working. Oh, there we go. All right, let me see if the clicker's not going to work. All right, I'll manually. Or not. There's a difference between what's showing here and what's on the computer here. So. See if I just hit this manually. There we go. Okay, so quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about after a quick introduction of my program, because that'll kind of be the central theme about why it's so important for us to pursue extramural funding for capital equipment. Kind of outline the goal, which is really just to compare and contrast this approach versus the S10 application process, highlighting the need to develop a really close relationship with if your institution has a strong foundation to do so. Then I'll represent a case study for our flow cytometry core of a really critical need to replace some equipment that was about to lose vendor support. Then end on kind of a comparison and then some take-home messages. And I'll have my friend at the bottom there kind of serve as a progress bar to where we are in my presentation. So, okay. So to introduce both myself and the Shared Research Resources program at Seattle Children's, I started in August of 2022, which is really right around the same time that the Shared Research Resources program was getting underway. So many of the programs that are represented here at ABRF have been around for an extensive period of time, but what my program is a relatively new collection of cores that are listed here. The top 2 have been in development for some time, but they really only went live last month, literally in February. So our ABSL3 core and our behavioral phenotyping core are very new. Flow cytometry, that is a core that had been decentralized in our immunology center, but was centralized into our program a couple of years ago. And then the 2 that have kind of been started from scratch are genomics and spatial biology collab, microscopy and histopathology collab, and we also have our preclinical imaging core that exists before. And prior to that, I had been at OHSU working with Andy Chitty, who I know is giving a talk at the same time right now, in the Shared Resources program there. It started in 2016. So again, really happy to be here. And what I'm trying to kind of emphasize is we have a new program, many competing capital needs. We have our own capital budget. Of course, we're going to pursue S10s to the extent that we can. But what else can we do to provide capital equipment for such a young program with so many competing needs? So why am I here today? And hopefully something that'll be interesting to you is to really just kind of outline those differences between seeking extramural equipment funding, capital equipment, from a philanthropic source, and I'm going to give the case of a Murdoch Charitable Trust and the traditional S10 route. So first things first, it's really, if you haven't already kind of made a connection with your foundation partners at your institute, can't overemphasize the value of that. So at Seattle Children's, I have a couple different fiscal years represented here from the latest data that was available. But what you can see is they have a significant amount of impact on our research institute. Almost half of the areas that they support comes directly to our research institute, as well as providing uncompensated care, clinical programs, specific urgent needs, and other capital projects. And most recently, in fiscal year 24, they provided over $47 million contributed towards private grant revenue for SCRI research. So just a tremendous value that they already bring. So it was kind of, for us, perhaps an untapped resource to collaborate with further. And they can do so many things for us, really. And what they've already been able to do is provide kind of an avenue, and we're trying to compete with so many different priorities in my job, but they provide so much support in identifying prospective funders, helping us determine our eligibility, providing that support that's so critical in submitting an application, managing those post-award deliverables, and serving as our point of contact for the funder, and in my case, the Murdoch Charitable Trust. So yeah, it's just now with that kind of stage set for what our foundation looks like, you can really start to get a sense of some overlapping interests and overarching goals. We each, our foundation publishes their own fiscal year goals. Their goals are around operational excellence, strategic growth, and discovery. That maps 100% onto what we're trying to also advocate for in shared research resources. So it's also can be helpful to see how the foundation has performed historically, to see if there's any priorities that they have that were perhaps unmet, or if there's a way that our program and shared resources can contribute to the goals that they have established for deployment of gift funding, and also contributing towards operational excellence, whether it's through extramural grants, et cetera. And then lastly, just an opportunity to connect the dots between what our institution has for its mission, vision, and values, so that we can build upon a shared culture of advocating for philanthropy in patient care and in research. That way we can discover, this kind of I've listed here kind of the main overarching vision for our research institute, to discover those new treatments and cures through our breakthrough research that we can provide infrastructure towards in shared research resources. So the case study around our flow cytometry core at the Institute regarding replacing sunsetting equipment. We were presented with the need to replace 4 analyzers in the flow core that were expected to sunset due to being obsolete and losing vendor support. I want to kind of contrast that between what people, I don't want you to think if we're sunsetting equipment, we don't, in Seattle, take it up to a high-rise building and throw it off to the top of the building at sunset. That's not what I mean by sunsetting. But that's basically, especially for flow cytometry equipment that can break down, things can get clogged. It's really important to make sure that you have that support at the ready. So a couple of graphs here showing the number of analyzers in the flow core that we had increasing over a period of time compared to the number of investigators using the core at the Institute. So you can see if there was a significant drop-off in analyzers in the core, that really wasn't going to match well with what our user base was going to expect in terms of the capacity that we could provide to them in our core for analyzers, and I'll get into sorters in a little bit later. So yeah, really critical need to make sure that we planned ahead to ensure that we have reliable capacity and uptime of this equipment, that, as we're trying to recruit and grow our user base, that people can have that reliability in our flow core that, again, as I mentioned, was recently centralized into the shared research resources. There was this high expectation of being able to perform these services after moving it from our center. Yeah, so just a quick outline. There was a clear goal, replace that those sunsetting analyzers with the state-of-the-art technology that was out there to reduce the reception services capacity. And again, going back to what I had outlined at the beginning, the context of this is we are very thankful and fortunate to have a capital budget available to us for our Shared Research Resources program. But because this is a growing program, it's going to have multiple competing priorities for state-of-the-art equipment, replacement of existing equipment that's, variety of different price ranges. So it's really important to we leverage all the different avenues that we have to procure equipment in our program. That way we can still maintain that uptime and capacity. So what this presented really was this opportunity to partner with the Murdoch Charitable Trust in working with them to see what we can do to meet their needs as an organization, understand their investment priorities and their mission itself, and to see where we can align to replace our equipment. So a quick outline of the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust, for those of you who don't know it. It's a Pacific Northwest-based trust that, and I'll read it here, helps support community-funded organizations at every level of their development through grants, programming, and other resources. And what really makes this stand out in comparison to S10s, at least from my view, is that they have such a broad focus area of areas of support that can include artistic and cultural expression. They provide grants for equipment for local theaters, for sound systems and speakers and lighting, civic engagement, community services, health and environmental stewardship, education and leadership development, and then lastly for us, scientific research. So really a broad area of application that they focus on, and you can see we're at the bottom there, but they really are a broad organization that provides so much support to, at least for those of you on the West Coast and the Northwest in particular, that we can use. So this is where we really kind of get started with the foundation. And you might notice some similarities and contrast with the S10 approach here. So particularly, we need to make sure that we meet their geographical, their requirements. It has to be, I don't know all the states, but basically in the Northwest. And we have to make sure that we meet their tax status requirements. Do we align with their priorities and missions? So as I mentioned on the previous slide, they have such a broad focus area and different areas that they cover. So really making sure that we can match what they are going to be interested in supporting through funding. But also is the equipment that we're looking for appropriate in terms of the amount that we are really going to be needing. Our analyzers, we go through a different review of what equipment is really necessary. They wouldn't really support something that's small dollar value or extremely large dollar value. So we really have to see where you can kind of meet in the middle. Prepare the letter of interest. That's pretty standard. But then kind of go into some of the more familiar areas, proposing a budget, developing a rationale, understanding your user base, doing those AUT calculations, which are always so fun. And then providing the institutional support to back this. But one thing that really kind of stands out here is that the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust, when they provide this sort of funding, they require an institutional match. So that's something that's really important to make sure that you're aware of when you're looking at your own capital budget, that you still kind of earmark an amount to match 50-50 ideally what you're asking the fund to provide. And then lastly, really getting to know the program officer. That's another area that's really something that you can emphasize in this project, because there typically is a site visit where you can actually give a physical or virtual tour of your research facility and get them to personally meet with your key users, take a look at the space, and really establish that strong relationship. Because if this is successful or not successful, this is still something that you can pursue year over year. So really developing that strong bond with the program officer at the trust. At least in our experience, that was really, really an amazing experience for me to see and get introduced to, but also to hopefully carry forward into the future. So what happened? We had an initial application that was a request for 2 different types of analyzers. One was a BD Facsymphony A5, and another was a Sony Spectral Analyzer. And we submitted this application. It went under review. And they really kind of highlighted that, maybe we shouldn't be pursuing these 2 different platforms because that can compromise our redundancy and the portability of studies. So we got really valuable feedback from the reviewers at the trust. So what we did was we changed our approach to pursue 2 complementary A5 analyzers from BD, and went back and forth a little bit, but actually we got funded, and we were able to kind of really meet that need to get new state-of-the-art analyzers to kind of avoid that crunch that we were facing in terms of losing our equipment. And then in hindsight, this has really kind of helped us develop that strong partnership that we were pursuing at the onset. That really is going to, what we've experienced since then is we've gotten tremendous price advantages from BD that have kind of resulted in kind of us focusing on pursuing them solely for these analyzers. But we've also gotten really good clarity in this process on what we should be doing next, because this is an annual process that we're going to be looking to pursue. So we did the same thing a year later, looking to replace our sorters in the flow core, which also went very, very well. We got, one thing that you might have to experience or understand with working at a charitable trust is their amount of funding is available based on their investment portfolio. So depending on how that performs, it could impact the amount of funding that they have and that they contribute. So we got roughly two-thirds of what we were asking for in our sorters, but we're still really happy with the process. So kind of taking a step back and looking how this compares to maybe what we already know about the S10 approach is that if your equipment needs support or range of disciplines beyond the typical NIH funded biomedical research, environmental sciences, engineering, or basic chemistry, this could be an approach that's of value. It's important to make sure that you have that matching fund available because, in S10, they provide a lot of your funding, but really important to make sure you have at least 50% of your expected cost for equipment covered. So in our case, we bought 2 equipment, so that's pretty easy. Just one of them goes towards the trust, and the other one comes from our own institute. Making sure that you're aligned with the mission of the trust. I doubt this is really applicable to most people here, but if your institution has relatively less NIH funding, then that's something that could be clearly helpful. And it's faster and more flexible, so some charitable trusts have rolling applications for faster review timelines. And the S10 process has more of a predictable schedule to it. So if you have a particularly urgent need for equipment, then this could be an approach that's helpful. But also those non-traditional equipment needs that might not specifically fit biomedical research focus. And this is my last slide for acknowledgements. Some take-home messaging. So what we really experienced was we were able to get our flow core up to date in terms of not only analyzers and also sorters with great role of the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust contributing towards this. We also have our microscopy core that I mentioned at the beginning that has been able to instead focus its efforts on an S10. We got a really well-scored S10 on a light sheet microscope, so we're able to kind of divvy up what do we need in our flow core. We're going to pursue that with the charitable trust. What do we need in our microscopy core? We're going to take the S10 approach because we have a really solid case to make for that. And we also were able to maximize our capital budget because, as I mentioned, we have such a growing program. We're able to kind of pull from different extramural sources, whether it's S10 or the Murdoch Trust, to then really prioritize our other funding available for immediate needs for replacing a failed equipment, for example, or what are these capital needs that we don't need to go through this extensive application process, what do we need to get right now? So we're able to kind of save our own funding for that. And then we have this great partnership with the foundation now where we lost our program officer to retirement, but we're really kind of continuing this relationship with them where we're going to invite them later this summer to take a look at our facilities and kind of keep this going on an annual basis so we can get more equipment. And then lastly, this is my acknowledgements. We have a really great team in Shared Research Resources. These are the people that, whether they're our SRR team or the PIs that were involved in the process, our foundation partners, and Dr. Moses Lee, who some of you may know, who recently retired from the trust, but he was our program officer and really integral for this process, and we're looking forward to meeting our next officer. And that's it. Thank you. Exit out of this. That's the cursor. There.
We were going to reserve the questions for a discussion at the end, but if you have one quick question while she's pulling her slides up, feel free. Yeah.
So what do you see as what are the downfalls that you experienced due to this? There must have been concerns.
Thank you. That's a good question. Downfalls. This was really positive overall experience. Downfalls, if it's a strong word, but the only really negative impact, if I can frame it that way, is that we did receive less funding than we had initially anticipated. So that did mean that, I mentioned we got like 2/3 of the funding for a sorter. So that means, we have this long list of our own priorities. So we had to kind of, maybe take one off our priority list for our own internal funding. But I mean, this is something that, does take time. But the priority was pretty clear for us, so it was worth the time to develop this process.
Hi, I'm Sara McArdle. I'm a senior staff scientist at the La Jolla Institute for Immunology, Microscopy, and Histology core facility. First, I want to take the time to thank you all for being here and thank Rand for inviting me. And I'm here to talk about, philanthropic investment in core facilities, or really why core facilities and advancement should be friends. First, just a little intro. The La Jolla Institute for Immunology, LJI, we're a very small nonprofit research institute in San Diego. Focus on diseases of the immune system, but that's pretty broad. It covers a whole lot of things. We have around 500 total employees, 21 labs, and 9 scientific core facilities. The large majority of our funding comes from the NIH, but we also get a good chunk from direct philanthropy from donors or grants from philanthropic organizations. And as an intro to the microscopy and histology facility, first, there's one core facility that's microscopy and histology, and then also a histopathology core, which is technically separate, but we work so closely together that we might as well just be one core. Between us, there's 7 full-time employees, somewhere around 92 years of combined experience, and we're a full-service core. We want people to come to us at the very beginning of an experiment. We'll help with experimental design, sample prep, microscopy, image analysis, interpretation, all of it. And as a quick plug, Zbigniew Mikulski, who's the director of the microscopy and histology side, is giving a talk on antibody validation tomorrow. And Dr. Ken Kim, who's the histopathologist, isn't giving a talk, but he's in the audience, and he's just great to talk to about all sorts of stuff. All right, so the ways cores contribute to LJI fundraising efforts is mostly through donor engagement, demonstrations, and direct grants. And I want to mention that I'm speaking from the perspective of the microscopy core, but all of this is actually true for every LJI scientific core, including the flow core, who has representatives in the audience. So first, the most frequent thing that I do is donor tours. And our advancement department, which is our fundraising department, organizes tours for any potential donors. And they have a pretty standard setup where they go through a couple of labs and then one of the cores. They come through microscopy maybe twice a month for 20 minutes. So overall, not a huge burden. But the important part is advancement prepares us with what these potential donors are most interested in, including diseases affecting them or their families, their work and educational history, and their overall outlook on philanthropy. And then Z and I tailor a presentation to fit this description. Tailoring a donor pitch, we always start with a core set of slides, which talk about who we are and what we do, and this very much focuses on the wow factor of successes, prettiest data, best stories. I'm a big fan of movies because donors are a big fan of movies, and this is just impressive, even if they don't actually know what it means. And this set of slides, we get to iteratively improve through feedback from donors and both donors and advancement. Twice a month for 10 years means we've given this presentation a couple hundred times, and we get to improve it a little bit every time that there's comments. And then from there, we insert a few slides about LGI's work on whatever their favorite topic is. This is usually a disease that's affecting someone in their family. So I have a just large deck of previously used slides on the most common diseases, COVID, cancer, diabetes, et cetera. And then we also have years of poorly curated data on a server from all the labs at LGI that we can mine for new examples. One day, this will be actually curated data, but that is not today. And we average, I don't know, about a slide per tour. And what's important when looking through past data for examples is we're trying to tell a story about what we learned and what it means for people like them. And sometimes it can be, sometimes I want to tell the thing I'm most proud of as a scientist of like, oh, I spent weeks optimizing this protocol to get 10% more light efficiency, and it matters to me, and they don't care at all. They just want to know like how are we making their lives better? And then we also tend to edit the language and the labels on the slides based on what we think that they can understand. People like retired doctors or retired scientists want relatively scientific labels. So in this case, we'd give them what's a germinal center and types of the cell types. This is also true for patient advocates or anyone who's been like really involved in philanthropy around a specific disease. They tend to actually understand at least a little bit of the biology going on there. But a lot of times non-scientists just want easier names, so we skip all the jargon and just talk about what the structures are doing and generally why they should care about the image. And then we also try to address their overall goal for philanthropy. This is something I didn't really understand when I first started giving these tours, but people, there are a variety of potential donors want different things from their money. Many just want to know that they're contributing to a cure for X. So in that case, an image like this that's showing a CAR T cell killing a tumor cell in a dish is convincing because look, cancer died, yay. But some people actually care more about getting good return on investment for their money. Obviously, they're never getting personally actual returns. But a lot of business people want to know that the money they're putting in is going to effectively do even more than just the pure cash value. So for them, we actually convince some people to donate money by saying how a cassette printer, which is an unreasonably expensive piece of equipment for being a printer, will end up saving more than its cost by reducing errors and recouping time that we're not writing out labels. And this was very convincing for some people. All right, so 20 minutes tour a couple of times a month, and then maybe an hour prepping a PowerPoint. There's still a time cost there, so why do we do it? Obviously, the biggest benefit is more funding. That's why we do these. Sometimes we get direct gifts for equipment or facilities. Often, the potential donors will just write a check to LGI as a whole, and this is unrestricted funds. And for years, always, having unrestricted funds has always been a concern because it's hard to fund very non-glamorous infrastructure. But recently, with the changes at the NIH, this has become a huge, huge thing. And so suddenly, the idea of like magic, free money, not free, like open money that we can spend on whatever we happen to need is a really big deal. In addition, talking to donors is a lot less effort on our end and a faster response than an NIH grant. When we submitted an S10 a few years ago, this was our total recharges over all of the equipment in all of the cores, all of the equipment in our core over a few months before and after submitting the S10. And we lost about 1,000 hours of recharges because it's not just our time that we're contributing to writing. If we tell people that we're too busy to train them for 2 hours, then they're not spending the next 8 hours on the equipment. So like in total, it really adds up this time. You're taking away from science. And also, even on a successful S10, there can be up to 18 months between submitting a grant and actually getting the money, and that's unreasonable and kills projects and is a problem. Recently, we also asked a donor to fund a new microscope that we wanted. They were approximately the same amount of money, more or less. The pitch was a tour and then a 3-page description of what we wanted. We put in somewhere around 20-ish hours on writing this description, and it was 3 weeks. So this is better. And just in case they happen to be in the audience, thank you, Michael and Elise Coit, for funding the Riverside Orion. The other reason I like doing these donor tours is it's honestly kind of fun to show off. As scientists, we're constantly critiquing ourselves. When we're constantly critiquing each other, if you submit a grant, the reviewers are just looking for reasons to pull your work apart, and it's depressing. Potential donors show up looking to be impressed. Like, they're in the building because they want to see this. And so you just get really good feedback and really happy feelings. This is an image of the gut microbiome. So this is bacteria living in the mouse small intestine. And I showed this image to maybe 50 lay people, and every time they just looked at it in awe because they didn't realize how beautiful something like an intestine could be. And then I showed it to the PI, that runs the lab of the postdoc who took this, and the first thing he pointed at was that little blob of blue in between the villi, and went, "What's that?" I'm like, yes, it's a tissue damage. You managed to find the one mistake. Cool, good job. All right, so then our advancement department also likes working with core facilities. One big reason is cores have access to data on a wide range of topics. I mentioned we have a server with really poorly curated data, but because the core staff have been here for so long, advancement can come to us and say, I need to show a picture about fibrosis, and I can go, yep, we studied that from this postdoc 6 years ago, and actually go find it. We also have a large amount of unrestricted data from calibrations, optimizations, et cetera, so that if it's any sample we made just for ourselves, they can publish, they can do whatever they want with the pictures. We're never going to try to publish it. Core staff are also permanent employees and have long-term relationships with advancement. So as I said, we can optimize these. We can iteratively optimize these presentations. We know what they want from us. They know what they can expect, et cetera. And also, cores can promote the institution as a whole instead of just one project or one lab. In our standard tour, we emphasize collaborations between labs and between cores. And the core, we're really a fundamental part of the institutional scientific environment. So again, this all leads to people just donating to the institute as unrestricted funds. And yes, microscopy-specific images are beautiful and comprehensible, so donors like things that they can see. But every core has a story to tell. Every core can explain why their technology is going to save the world. All right, and finally, why donors like supporting cores. Again, business people really like the multiplier effect that supporting a core helps many labs, many projects over many years. It's a long-term investment in the institution. It's also less risky. You don't have to pick one project and usually a layperson who doesn't really understand the science say yes, this is the method that's gonna work. You can instead just help everyone. Also, supporting equipment is very concrete and very tangible. If you want to, wet labs are messy and confusing, and every piece of equipment in this picture is essential. You need pipettes, you need buffers, you need all of it, and in total it can add up to a whole lot of money. and it might be like the same amount of money as a piece of equipment, but like they understand what they're buying. It's got a price tag. It's this. We can put their name on it. They like that. And then it frees up funds for the messy lab bench stuff. Okay. In addition to one-on-one tours, we do like hands-on demonstrations as like parts of Advancement organizes bigger events once or twice a year, and then asks the course to do some hands-on demonstrations. One thing that we've gotten really good results on is called a selfie, where we advertise it as see your own DNA. So we hand them a Q-tip, they take a cheek swab, we stain the cells with a 10-minute protocol, load it onto the microscope, and then we have them actually like touch the microscope, take the picture. Like, so they're really feeling involved in this, and it's their cells and they're doing it. And then we can sometimes like print the picture off a photo printer instantly and hand it to them as something that they can take home that's theirs.
That's a great idea.
Z is in the audience, it was his idea. Yeah, that's all you need. And lectins, right? Yes. Yeah. Also at other events, we've done VR, virtual reality demonstrations, where we'll actually like put the headsets on them. We bought the VR headset a few years ago for a couple $100, and we'll put it on them and load up a sample, and they can, again, like really see it. If you're used to working in something like a MARS or any sort of 3D software, you can interpret the 2D screen and see it as 3D, but if you're not used to that, it doesn't quite feel right. So this really helps them understand what a sample is, what a cell is, what are we doing. The software used for this is called Confocal VR and was published a few years ago. Okay, in addition, we do try to get grants from foundations or philanthropic organizations. As I've tried to emphasize, individuals, donors want stories and feelings. Organizations tend to be a little drier and want numbers and results. I'm not going to get into this too deeply because Aaron did such a great job talking about what that looks like. But I just want to mention that you all know that there's really no NIH grants available for core staff salaries. They'll fund the equipment, but they won't fund the people to run it, which isn't great. Many organizations, American Heart Association, or the cancer ones, focus on a specific field or a specific disease and only fund projects or researchers that are purely focused on that, which doesn't define core facility staffs. We do a lot of different things. So honestly, there's just very few funding opportunities for service-based cores, which means core funding, and core staff funding in particular, is this critical unmet need. And if there's any potential donors in the audience, yeah. In 2019, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative recognized this critical unmet need and how useful cores are to the scientific infrastructure as a whole. So they opened an RFA for imaging scientists. It's open to staff scientists and faculty. I don't think they ever used the word core facility, but the RFA itself made it clear that that's who they were targeting. And it was focused on the translation, focused on people who translate between technology and those who need to use the technology. And the goal was trying to help broad dissemination of expertise and equipment. And the grant provided salary and some travel and teaching support, but was not to be used for project work. This was purely salary, really. I was lucky enough to be chosen in cycle 1. And the salary support provided stability, respect, and time for development projects. And as you know, like grants are kind of the currency of academia. That's how you get admins to respect you. So having a grant was a big deal for me. I can honestly say the CCI grant changed my career. It gave me speaking opportunities like this. I don't think Rand would have ever found my name if I wasn't part of this CCI board. It gave me the opportunity to give back to the community by hosting affordable training courses for open source software like QPath. And it gave me the time to let me learn some skills that would have been very difficult for me to learn if I had to actually recharge all of my time in a week. Unfortunately, this particular grant is no longer offered by CZI. I'm sorry about that. But there are other RFAs that are open right now. And the application process is a lot easier than an NIH award. It's actually a lot easier than what Aaron was talking about last session. The imaging scientist one, it was a couple of pages of narrative and some like financial information and some like numbers and things, but it's overall not too bad. So even if you think there's a chance you'll get it, I recommend trying the application. It's worth it. Overall, my tips for applicants to the CZI grants, they really, really like quantitative metrics. What's weird is they don't actually care what the metric is. Like if you want to talk about publications, great. If you want to talk about citations to your papers or downloads from your GitHub repository, whatever it is, that's fine. That they just want you to have a number now and predict what the number will be in the future with their money. Like they just want to see growth. They are a big fan of open science and community building. And they want big numbers, big dreams. They want to change the world, and they want to know how giving you this money is going to do that. Because of their mission, everything must have a long-term disease impact, but that's pretty broad, and they're well aware that like basic science contributes to disease, so that it's pretty easy to hit that. Right, I think I'm just about at time, so I wanted to say thank you to you all, thank you to the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, thank you to Z, the director of my core, and to the LGI advancement team. I didn't list all of their names because there's many of them, but they're fantastic.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Sarah. All right, I'm going to share a little bit of our story at the University of Louisville securing a philanthropic investment relatively recently. Just a little bit of background on U of L. We have a research enterprise that does about a little over $200 million a year of research expenditures. We're roughly 80% in the biomedical sciences, but we have a strong School of Engineering, a strong College of Arts and Sciences as well. We have about 20 to 25 cores, depending on how you count. I know that was a message that some of the presentations yesterday made. It's sometimes tough to exactly nail down that number, but we're very decentralized. Cores live in all sorts of different units, from divisions, departments, centers, institutes, colleges, schools. And then finally, we are as you can imagine, in the state or the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and we participate in the EPSCoR and IDEA research capacity competitiveness development programs, if you're familiar with those programs. If we kind of go back in time about 20 months, we were able to announce a grant from the Jewish Heritage Fund of $3 million to our university, focused specifically and entirely on core facilities in the biomedical sciences. This is a 3-year, $3 million award. And I think sort of if you ask kind of the so what, like what makes this interesting or what makes this potentially unique, I think first the magnitude of the investment. I mean, for us at U of L, this kind of net new external funds is quite significant and enables us to do something a step change above what we would be able to do otherwise. And then also, I mean, I'm aware of a number of really exciting examples of philanthropic investments in individual cores or in groups of cores doing amazing things, but this is the only one, and I'd love to be proved wrong. The only one I'm aware of like alignment of a philanthropic investment with an overall institutional level core facilities program, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So 4 topics I hope to address. Kind of the background of how this investment came about. the importance of the rigor and kind of demonstrating best practices in our proposal and in our sort of pitch to the funder. Some of the elements that may be of interest in our proposal, and then what challenges remain even after receiving this award. The Jewish Heritage Fund is a grant-making organization in Louisville. It was established in 2012 as a so-called health conversion foundation from the sale of Jewish Hospital. And I wanted to learn a little more background on these foundations. They're formed via the proceeds of mergers and acquisitions of nonprofit healthcare entities. And collectively in the US, they award about $1 billion a year of grant funding. As you can see, there are quite a number of these foundations, and they operate in a lot of states. They've got about $26 billion of combined assets. And this quote I found interesting. I mean, while this figure on like a macro or national scale may not seem that impressive, typically these foundations, live and fund projects within a pretty small radius. So if you happen to have Health Conversion Foundation or the alternate name Health Legacy Foundation in your community, it really can make a meaningful impact on a number of different areas. For those of you who attended the MWACD meeting that we hosted in Louisville last October, Jeff Polson, the president and CEO of JHF, kind of gave a keynote on his perspective. So there's obviously some interplay on what I'm going to present on. A little more background here. So the Jewish Hospital was established in Louisville in 1903. Some partnership with the university began in 1943, and then again, as I mentioned, the sale of the hospital resulted in some proceeds that were used to establish the fund. And then in 2019, the university purchased Jewish Hospital from another buyer, and it operates it now as part of U of L Health. JHF has given a little over or about $100 million of grants since its inception. Sorry for the Mac to PC conversion on some of the graphics, but I think one of the unique things, my understanding is it's quite rare actually for health conversion foundations to have research as one of the explicit mission or vision elements, but we're fortunate, I think, that JHF has medical research as one of its three core investment foci. And there actually is a history of funding from JHF to research at U of L. In the first several years, this focused on individual research projects. And in Jeff's talk that I referenced, I mean, he talked about the challenges of a very small, nascent foundation staff trying to evaluate complex scientific proposals. And, I can imagine that's quite a challenging thing. So they transitioned in around 2018 to funding more research infrastructure and research infrastructure designed to enhance competitive NIH funding. So as listed here, it includes things like startup packages for new faculty, bridge grants, and new instruments, but these were new instruments that lived in individual PI labs. And as ABRFers know, that's not necessarily always the best way to invest in instruments. So, what I'm going to talk about is how we tried to make the case to JHF that core facilities were a worthwhile investment to make. So sort of a schematic timeline. I joined the university in August of 2022 as sort of the first person to really think about, wake up every day and think about core facilities and try to create, a method to the madness and, a coordinated support infrastructure around core facilities. And we spent about 6 months assessing the current state and crafting kind of a university strategy for how are we going to go about, hoping to enhance the overall core ecosystem at the university. And in parallel to that, we had a number of conversations and interactions, including core tours and various forums with representatives from JHF, beginning to make the case and understand their point of view around, how about trying investing in core facilities as an effective investment. We launched a U of L core facility strategy in February of 2003, and we also at the same time, or roughly the same time, submitted a proposal and business plan to JHF. We began to implement the strategy, And for about 5 months, we had continuing discussions and interactions with JHF. They wanted to understand us and kind of our buy-in and partnership, the university's commitment, which did include, somewhat in parallel to what Aaron said, essentially a demonstrated one-to-one match for monies they put in. We had to show that the university was putting in, either through central investment or unit-based investment, significant funds into core facilities, both existing and new funds. And then in July, we received a grant from JHF. And since that time, we've been implementing, sort of a fully aligned university strategy and, again, this significant investment, the JHF grant and business plan. I think from our perspective, I mean, we came into this process, I won't say like overconfident, but, with a fairly strong position of kind of knowledge and experience with core facilities. I mean, I've been attending, this is a bit of an ad for ABRF, I've been attending annual meetings since 2009 and presenting at them, and was able to publish a couple of the early papers in core management in JBT. Had an opportunity to work with over 12 institutions on kind of core management, core operations projects. And so I think we had a leg up. We also, I think, pretty apt timing, sort of from scratch developing a university strategy around cores at the same time that we're trying to make the case to a funder. But I think, we also learned quickly that the JHF committee around medical research projects and the overall board had a number of experienced business leaders on those structure, kind of governance, organizational structures from a bunch of industries, and they have a mindset of ROI and like, what are you actually going to be able to deliver for us? So I think that was an important guiding factor. And I think also there were some scientists on these committees, including some that were familiar with U of L's past, including a former vice chancellor for research. And I think there was some, I used the word realism because I hesitated to use the word skepticism, but like, if U of L hasn't done this yet, like why are we to believe that U of L is going to be able to like turn the dial on cores and getting them better managed, et cetera. So, I mean, this resulted in significant planning rigor. We found that the plan we were developing in our proposal just had to have a ton of details, a ton of documented evidence of like, we saw this at University of Y, we saw this at this place. These are lessons learned. I mean, not that we could necessarily lift them and insert them exactly the same at U of L, but really making the case with a ton of evidence. They expected a business plan, a financial pro forma with sort of columns for JHF investment, for U of L investment, and again, a link to really an overall plan that was sufficiently compelling to them and supported by best practices. So some of the proposal elements that may be of interest, I mean, I just talked about the sort of rigor and the compelling approach. I mean, I will just highlight that more. It was more than we expected, but I think, clearly worth the payout. And I think, again, forced us to go back to our network and our understanding of what other cores are doing to really, build effective coordinated support infrastructures given limited funds. Talked about the business plan. And then this compelling case. So it's beyond the scope of this presentation, but the approach we've taken at U of L to sort of, organizing and supporting our cores is to define sort of a coalition of the willing, so-called Louisville research cores. So these are designed as an aspirational yet attainable set of core facilities. And so, those cores that really want to pursue and achieve best practices in operations, management, and strategy apply to join this program. And there are admittedly a number of expectations, but a resultant number of benefits, including the large lion's share, if not all of the new investment that we're going to make in cores is in these Louisville research cores. We'll continue to provide advice and support to all the cores across the campus, but largely if they're following the rules, if they're in compliance and they don't want to participate, then they're largely off on their own. We had a number of clear investment aims and mechanisms. That's the next slide. And then finally, as is the case in many talks at ABRF on the admin track, performance assessment and ROI was extremely important, so we had to address that in our proposal as well. We had 3 specific aims, each with a number of mechanisms, and these are the initial kind of budgeted dollar requests from JHF. And each of these columns has a corresponding U of L investment. But you can see investments in equipment acquisition, operating subsidies include service contracts, strategic investment of core staff. These are the annual investments. Sort of the cost of running this coordinated support infrastructure. So those costs are the sort of salaries associated with those, and travel costs are entirely paid for by U of L. But we budgeted quite a conservative large amount, I think, for implementing a core management software system. And as you can see, $25K for trying to develop and incent professional development opportunities for core staff. So for example, funding anyone that wants to come to ABRF or the chapter meetings. And then a series of voucher competitions. All of these, some of you may have these at your institutions. All of these were modeled after examples we saw out in the world. So the first one, is relatively common, I think. Vouchers to incentivize the use of core facilities, in particular LRCs at U of L. And then vouchers around incentivizing integration of existing equipment into LRCs, and vouchers for sort of companies in the regional innovation ecosystem. I'll just say, because we're limited on time, the last 2 mechanisms have not yet been brought up, implemented, or sort of activated, largely because the first voucher program has been tremendously successful. We're about to close round 6. We're now investing about $250K a year from JHF and U of L resources in that program. The other notable change is we're definitely not spending this much on software yet, and mechanism 1A, the investment in equipment, is quite a bit higher than the number shown there, and probably to date the investment in subsidies is quite a bit lower. Okay, so this is kind of my last slide. Kind of what are the challenges that remain? I think the positives, are that I sense is this aligned strategy, university strategy around cores, somewhat de novo, coordinated approach, aligned with this new JHF grant and business plan. I think the interplay between internal and external funding is reinforcing. I think that there have been some new net university dollars invested into cores, in part because we were able to demonstrate that we have buy-in from external partners. Strong university leadership commitment. We think, although it's difficult to prove, I guess, that there is an accelerated interest in pursuing the Louisville Research Core designation, sort of tipping the balance because of some of the dollar figures that we're able to flash in front of cores. But there are a few challenges that remain, at least. The first is, just the general challenge of quickly making investments that are, strategically justified, right? I mean, spending $1 million a year is kind of a good problem to have, but to do so and be good stewards of funds is difficult. So, we have admittedly started at a slower trajectory, and we're ramping up. We're about on pace now. We continue, as I mentioned, very decentralized cores. Many have been around for a while. Many but also many are newer. I think trying to affect major culture change without a direct control, and with the presence of some remaining incentives that sort of reinforce the status quo is challenging. So this art of science of persuasion is definitely comes into play, even with a lot of dollars. And at kind of an individual core level, I mean, everyone's busy, right? So I think that funding only goes so far in sort of convincing core leadership that one, they should that they should change, or that they maybe aren't stellar in their core operations and best practices. So I think we're trying to make that case. We're trying to be supportive, but there is a certain amount of inner drive that has to sort of exist in order for cores to to want to be motivated to change. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. We're going to transition now to panel Q&A. Thank you. I'll ask if anyone does have a question, please make your way to the mic just so they can be recorded for posterity, I guess.
So those were all really interesting and cool, sort of interrelated but different. It was great. Good organization, Rand. So my question is, it was directly and sort of indirectly, like the focus, there was a big focus on equipment, and in particular in each presentation sort of, I would say, just looking at the numbers Rand showed, and first speaker said this directly, second speaker you didn't go into it in detail, but like sort of middle of the road equipment, like, right? Not stuff that's like, oh, I need a new Vortex Genie, but not like we want a cryo-EM, right? So I'm in a privileged position, some people are, to have internal capital equipment funds as an annual recurring thing, which generally fit in again into that sort of middle, oh, we need a Sony sorter that's 220K or whatever. But the problem really becomes that, if you need a new EM or you need a new NMR or you need a new multiphoton, sort of, S10s or HEI S10s or MRIs, if that's your area, are the only game in town. I mean, have any of you had experience dealing with either foundations or individual donors and broaching into the world of $1 million plus equipment? There's a little switch.
Thank you. I have not. I mean, I'll just say, we could have, I guess, chosen that path. We could have tried to make the argument, right, to JHF that we've identified these, 4 things that are very expensive that, and make the case that they're really going to enhance the research enterprise, et cetera, et cetera. But we did not. I think it's a really interesting discussion, right? You could make very targeted investments. We could have argued that, we've got 25 cores, we're going to give them each, X, just spread the money super thin, and we thought that was not going to be as effective as sort of, a more focused approach, but we could have gone even more focused.
Yeah, and I'll also say that we have not, at least I have not, we were capped by the Murdoch Trust at $650K. Also understanding that there's that institutional match coming from our own internal budget, so there are some limitations that we had for what we could do. And depending on who you talk to, an analyzer or a sorter is or isn't very exciting, but we were able to kind of emphasize our case by the loss of this equipment and the impact that would have, and I think that's what kind of brought it over the hump to be funded.
Hey, my name is Stuart Little. I am the operations manager at the Biomedical Research Imaging Center at Chapel Hill. Quick question about what methods you're using to recognize philanthropic individuals or organizations. I've been told that things like donor walls are a little bit antiquated these days, so just curious to see what y'all are doing for that. Thank you.
Hi. We literally put plaques on equipment if they were funded by individuals. We often, again, because it's a microscopy core, we get pictures. So if we get a particularly good picture off a piece of equipment, we will print it out, frame it, and send it to them. We have a monthly magazine, quarterly magazine that LJI as a whole produces, and we'll name them in it and make a big deal of it. We do have a donor wall, but I agree. I think that's the least impactful of it.
We have not taken a really institutional approach. I know one of our cores has put up some signage acknowledging the JHF funding in particular. I think our approach is more, we continue to meet with them regularly, both formally and informally. I mean, Louisville's a relatively small place, so I'll just run into our program manager, sort of walking her dog, and I think those sorts of things can go a long way, but obviously don't translate that way. So yeah, it's probably a good idea. We probably should take a more systematic approach to make sure they feel the love. But I think we're doing an okay job.
Yeah, we probably also should do a little bit of a better job. I mean, beyond website postings and acknowledging the funding source and wherever it's appropriate in a grant or a project. Institutionally, of course, we name our buildings after large donors, but I'd be interested in maybe developing some sort of a policy around. So I'm trying to think of is there a conflict of interest or anything like that we should be aware of? That's something that I might want to consider too.
Sorry, one more thing I thought of. Even for the donors that donate less than an entire piece of equipment, if they donate to a specific project or they seem interested in a specific project and we publish a paper, our advancement department will write up a paragraph and again, literally mail it to them of look what your money did. Here's a, yay.
Thanks all of you, that was fantastic. So I'm Kara Clissold from UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine. I have a question kind of maybe specific for Sara because your background seemed much more sort of science and PhD, very science focused. Did you get any special training in interacting with donors and navigating some of these conversations?
Not through grad school, no. LJI itself does this program called the SPARK program, which you would find out about, it's a small funding opportunity for new scientists or young scientists. And when I was just out of grad school, I applied for funding, and part of that is the advancement team literally trains you and how to talk about that. So LJI did it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all. I think this is a very, very good topic, and I feel almost like a hidden treasure. I'm Vidhu from UBC, Vancouver. So my question is also for Sara, although I think each one of you can answer if you have had any success with any philanthropic investment that also helped support the salary of the core staff. Because I know that most of the times, infrastructure, capital, has been one of the things that they are very interested in because of the tangible thing. But have you had any success with the salary or operational costs, like the service contracts? I mean, I think you have very good relationship with the donor, so I think that I wanted to know if it translated.
I don't believe we've ever gotten a donation that is earmarked for salary, but anytime it's unrestricted, it just goes into the indirect fund pool, which eventually pays my salary and all core staff salary.
It's easier to get them for principal investigators.
Yes.
So when we recruit a new lab, for example, it will be much easier to get the funds from the donors, to buy them the equipment, or to provide their funds.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just say, we've been hesitant to provide kind of baseline salary support across cores. I think it's tremendously valuable, but I think we could kind of quickly run out of funds. For one example, so the Proteomics Technology Center, Proteomics Core, is one of our sort of on the pathway toward Louisville Research Corps status, and they made the case that in addition to investing in sort of single-cell proteomics equipment, they needed a person to kind of have that expertise. And so we agreed for a short time to fund, recognizing that it would take a while for the demand to build up and for the cost to be covered. But again, very strategic, targeted investment in core staff.
Hi, thanks again for your guys' talk. Sam Adkins, Nationwide Children's Hospital. I was curious, for people that are at institutes that have huge philanthropy departments like children's hospitals, how do you begin that relationship with that department and kind of advocate for cores that were worthy recipients of philanthropy funding?
Yeah, well, I didn't kickstart that conversation because I was actually being onboarded right around the time when we were starting to develop this. But yeah, fortunately, they're right across the next building. So after I kind of got looped into this process, I personally went over, that personal relationship is really key, I think, and kind of learning about their history, their goals. And I have my own goals and my own priorities. So just there was a concerted effort at least, for a month or so, where I kind of tried to be in the middle of that Venn diagram of what they're looking for and what I'm looking for to make a good case. And now that we have this in place, the foundation is, not to be no pun, but the foundation is set for really just to continue this. I think our flow cytometry core is relatively set. We can always use new things, but there's other cores that I want to try to pivot the approach towards. And I think having the strong relationship, in addition to the strong relationship with the funder, to the site visits, it's fun too. It's a really interesting way that I hadn't previously had a special experience, but I really enjoy it, so it's exciting. Yeah.
I was curious what your plans were for, say, the next step. I worked at an institute where we were really funded generously to support core operations, but we were funded so generously that it was hard to sustain. So what are some of your plans for sustaining the types of funding, especially the JHF type of funding, that makes this a longer-term solution?
Yeah, it's an excellent question and certainly on our minds. I think there are certainly opportunities for us to go back to that funder. Obviously, we would have to demonstrate sufficient ROI for them to entertain a future request for funding. I think, as I tried to make the case admittedly without specifics, I mean, we have been able to make the case for increased institutional funding. So I think if the funding were to drop off, we'd still be at a better position than we were prior to it existing. And then we're also looking, are there other foundations that would begin to entertain questions about funding cores? Again, trying to use our experiences and sort of from JHF as a way to demonstrate.
Yeah, and I think if I could just make a comment, I also want to acknowledge the risk that we had, because what we were doing, we weren't adding net new equipment, we were replacing a critical need. So if we hadn't gotten the funding, we would have had to pull from our capital budget. That would have really restricted the growth of our other cores, that we had a little bit more flexibility to see how we could grow them. But yeah, that's exactly what Rand said. I want to really see what we can do to use the same energy and the relationship that we've built with the foundation to include other sources. Seattle's a pretty rich environment that we can pull from. Bill Gates is next door. I want to see if there's other approaches that we can take. Just knowing that our own capital budget, while it's great that we have it, it's not a guaranteed thing to continue year over year, or it'll adjust. So having as much variety that we have available to us is going to be important.
Hello, I'm Thomas Diefenbach. I'm from the University of Miami, Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. So I think it's important to think big sometimes too, because you can approach a person who may have nothing to do with healthcare or have any history of disease in the family or that kind of thing. For an example, I'm from an institution, not the University of Miami, but another one. And there was one person, and over a period of time, we got $750 million from him. And this is a person that, he has his own, business, and he doesn't need to be in the public eye or anything, but he wants his name associated with a particular cure or therapy, right? And, he's not even in biotech, okay? So it could be something very random, that you come across that could lead to something like that and change an entire institution. So I'm just saying, think big, like try to find someone that isn't just thinking about hundreds of thousands of millions, but hundreds of billions, And because there are people out there, like how many billionaires are there in the U.S.? Like check your neighborhood, because they're there. And they have stories to tell too. So, whoever visits your facilities for the tours and things, you have no idea. I mean, we even had a Spanish family, a family from Spain visit our facility. I was giving tours too, and you have no idea where they're coming from. So even think internationally, right? Because they might have, even if they, studied there at some point or moved away. So yeah, just thought I would add that because that's a different tier. Right? Yeah, thank you.
How does one stumble into these?
I keep getting asked that. I mean, that digest, the Philanthropic digest that was cited, that's kind of interesting to see. And then, of course, looking at the news, going through the news and seeing who's... No, I mean, of course, that would be at the institutional level. Usually the institution has their own, they approach donors in a very formal way, but you can still provide ideas and say, hey, for our core, or let's say you have a new, renovation, and oh, you have a new renovated space, let's put equipment in it, right? So that's actually what I'm trying to do as well. So yeah, like anything is really possible in this country.
I was just going to make a joke, and I think we should look at all the routes where the people walk their dogs. And then we can get our dogs, right? And run into them.
Thank you all for joining us. Yeah, we really appreciate it.